never used the gavel before. That was fun. All right. Good morning. Welcome to the meeting. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks everyone for hanging out for extra 12 minutes while we were chatting. And we'll start now. All right, I'll kick it off to anyone else who wants to start. Anybody have anything to say? Yeah, so we did,
Oh, I would just like to thank you for attending the board meeting on Tuesday and speaking about the progress that the working group has made.
Thank you, happy to do it. And I don't know if you had a chance to check out the last meeting or talk to anybody about our last meeting, what we did. I didn't have a chance to talk to you about it, so. Okay, we mostly just kind of like, we spent the first half of the meeting complaining about what had happened at the board meeting before, and then we got back to it and sort of went over the personal cultivation thing. And that's sort of one thing I wanted to, we talked about landlord notification and landlord rights and things like that. Are you listening, Blake? So this is for what we were talking about with the landlord notification and permission. We had a discussion about that, and I thought it'd be a good idea for as any of these ordinances come out, that we find a way to notify the public about them, because most county ordinances just get buried and forgotten about. You don't even know what they are until you've broken them or violated them. And so especially with this, we should have the county print out something that's simple and easy to understand, a summary of the ordinance, each one as they come out, especially the personal cultivation one. That's going to be relevant to most people. And then on the reverse side of that, something that is like a landlord notification, advising people of their rights and things like that. And that could be something that would go to property managers, real estate agents, things like that, to make sure it's out in the community, nobody misses it.
Do we have the personal cultivation ordinance written up yet, or I know the...
Not yet, I don't think.
No?
It's close.
Okay.
It's close. We've got a draft we've been kicking around, and it's not far off. It's just a matter of time.
So we're going to just get right into discussion on a retail ordinance. So that would be retail access, whether for medical use, for recreational use, or for both. And so that doesn't have anything to do with production or manufacturing, or cultivation. This would just be retail access as we see now in dispensaries that we have.
Well, I guess the first comment would be is, you guys would know more than I would probably, is how many medical retailers are there right now in Delaware County?
I believe there are two. There's me, Delaware Patients Together, and Patty on North Crest.
And I think we had maybe one or two others that have recently stopped operating.
Do we have, or do we know of anybody that has tried or getting a license or permit to operate more?
I can say that we've received 2 license requests, but they are for an existing, previously mentioned business. Well, actually, they're 2, but they were 2 separate licenses, but they were for the same business. One was recreational retail sales, and the other was for medicinal retail sales.
I feel I would be withholding information, but Delaware Patients Together has a medical use pending, and we've been granted an adult use license. So, and I believe Patty has a medical use license right now as well. So there are 2 state licenses that we know of operating in the county.
All right.
I'll just clarify a little bit too. You know, as an existing nonprofit collective myself, you know, we are actually seeking currently a retail storefront ourselves within the county. We haven't decided city or county yet, but, you know, it's kind of hard right now without having a general ordinance to actually get a landlord to give us a lease. So, but, you know, that's just a little informational for everybody. So there may be 3 here real soon.
So are we, I don't know if we, maybe not a consensus necessarily, but of the opinion that we should be looking to create an ordinance that first allows existing operations to continue, like let's say as a specific sub-ordinance to the overall retail ordinance? Because let's say, I'm just throwing this out here, in a month to maybe 2 months, the county may reverse action and put a ban back in place, which then theoretically eliminates all these licenses that are beginning. And so this ordinance that we're talking about creating maybe is tiered 2 different ways. We're talking about maybe putting an allowance for existing places in place and then setting up a secondary tier for new businesses to start, right?
I personally am in favor of starting sort of with what we have and seeing how that works. Like you're saying, in terms of replacing the ban that we had and how all that's going to go down, I'm not. Joel, County Council, knows more about how the details and the legality of how that's going to work. It's sort of my understanding that there isn't enough time to create a regulatory ordinance even for retail in time, and we're going to need a replacement ban put back before we can do that. But I don't know if Joel's ready to talk about that or not.
I won't talk about specifics of what ordinance will come forward and when. I think the working group should assume that, you know, sometime in the next month to 2 months, there will be a permanent ban in place. And that anything from here on out that the working group proposes will go to the planning commission, go to a public hearing, and then to the board. And so, you know, realistically, even if a commercial ordinance was ready right now, we're still probably looking at a 2 to 3, maybe 4 month period with the ban before it gets amended to the new one. So, you know, the looming question of what happens to people's state licenses when that ban comes in is still not one that I want to answer. You know, and in addition to whether or not those state licenses become, you know, null and void, is the issue of whether or not the county is going to enforce that. You know, those are 2 separate questions. Are those licenses good, and is the county going to try to do anything about it? You know, those are kind of really big policy questions probably for the board of supervisors. So I think, you know, if the working group kind of just keeps on track and works on what a really good retail ordinance is and kind of lets the other things shake out, I think it would be best.
Sounds good.
So, I mean, that creates this little bit of a gray area then. If our focus really should be on existing operations, because verbally we've just discussed that the existing operations have either approved or at least pending licenses that will be approved before any potential ban.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should just be focusing on retail ordinance as a whole. As Joel's saying right here, that not necessarily this won't affect the other, you know, so.
I'd say regardless of this adventure that we're going on, you know, operating without any regulation at the county, I think regardless of that, I would still have liked to see an initial retail ordinance that really just includes what we have. I'm kind of leaning in that direction for every aspect of the business, because I think it's an easy way to start into it. It's not a way to lock out future growth or for somebody else who wants to, you know, be in the business. But I think it just makes it easier. We experiment and learn from the operations that we've had for many, many years, not just because they're, you know, demonstrating what Bob and Roger did at the board meeting and what they can do. That's sort of what it is, you know. But I think I don't know if this is true, but from my understanding, the state, there's the county doesn't have to do anything. As soon as the county has the ban back on the books, the state pulls the license. I think all the county has to do maybe is send an email. I don't think the county has to do any enforcing whatsoever. The state just pulls the license, the temporary license, and so it becomes invalid and you're operating without a license. So it's just like it was before. So I don't think it really is going to benefit any business to do it necessarily over the long term, other than just to
I don't know.
demonstrate.
I don't know if the state will do that. I don't know if it's their intention to do that. But I don't think the state has to do that. I don't see anything in the law that makes that something we should assume is going to happen. Maybe it will. You know, it's a significant gray area that, while I have my views on it, those are going to remain kind of the private views of council for a while. So, you know, no guarantees either way on that one.
Jesse, what I think I hear you saying, and this is, I'm just going to word it a little differently, is I think our greater mission here is to write an ordinance that is as good as we can do right now. And I'm going to just suggest it this way, is let's not get hung up on the current culture of politics. And so let's just stay to our mission and
Yeah,
keep
I
moving
agree.
forward. So.
Yeah, well said, thank you.
The concern I have with tailoring an initial retail ordinance to what exists is that I think in the long run we're better off deciding what the retail climate should look like, where it should happen, what restrictions should go on it. And then, you know, maybe the existing things aren't even in compliance with that. Maybe the actual current marketplace or current situation needs to change to meet what is really best for the county. And I don't know, but I think starting abstractly with kind of where it should happen, how much should happen, you know, issues like, do we want a certain area of the county where we've sequestered retail, or do we want them not being allowed to be close to each other? You know, there's different considerations for concentration. Those are things that I think, if taken abstractly first and decide whether existing stuff is compliant with that later, would be better.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't mean like existing locations. I meant more like existing quantity, since our existing quantity is probably evidence of a sufficient supply right now. Right, for the medical.
Do we have,
That's all I'm saying. It's a starting point, you know. It's like we don't, you know, if 2 or 3 or 4 is working now, then we don't need 30 or 40, obviously. That's what I mean, is just sort of like a quantity of access points is right now is an okay starting point. I don't see an obvious need for a huge expansion of the number of retail access points. But yeah, where they go is probably the bulk of this discussion, I would say.
you know, it's also common to limit the number of permits. So if you're saying limit to the number that exists now that we can count, or, you know, not limited and just assume the market's going to choose how many make it. Those are all kind of the kinds of conversations that really are what could take a while, right? We're starting from the universe of possibilities right now is very large. And to narrow that down to where we can start talking about specifics is kind of a key task here.
Yeah,
Who,
go ahead.
who gets the permits from the state when somebody applies to get a retail license from the state? Who gets the permit in the county organization to okay it or say that it's okayed?
Currently, the requests are running through the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. However, it's our opinion that they should also run through community development, because we're the ones who should be verifying whether or not it complies with county code. So at this point, we're trying to get that straightened out.
So our retail ordinance needs to be written very tightly with what you would okay and do anyhow, otherwise it does not matter.
Yes, you are correct.
So do you at planning, or is there an idea of a number of shops maybe that should be allowed? I mean, if you go to Brookings, they've got 15. you know, on the way up there and in Brookings, and I think that's absorbent and kind of like you're going through a town of these little red, or green squares, you know, and I don't think that that's what we want to represent, or I don't want that in Del Norte County. So I don't know if it would say Del Norte County, and then you have the city. Those are two separate places. Is there a total of 10 that maybe should be in from Klamath to Smith River? Because you know somebody's going to open one in Smith River, you know somebody's going to open one in Klamath, and then however many in between, you know, are there going to be one at the Fort Dick store? Is there going to be one at, you know, somewhere. So you get to okay the apps from the state. What is maybe yours, or what if the county father's given you any kind of consensus what they're looking for?
No, to answer your question, we don't have any feedback as far as, how many, et cetera. I like your idea of those, looking at it from geographic areas and concentration. That's one way that we look at alcohol permits through the state, where they want to make sure that there's not an undue concentration in particular areas. And, perhaps that could be something that could also work with the cannabis retail. The county doesn't have as much commercial zone land as, for example, the city. And the majority of ours is obviously along our major collector roads, North Crest, Washington, et cetera. We have commercial along the highway, but a lot of that is in the coastal zone. And I believe a lot of it has commercial recreational zoning in that it would currently not be permitted under our current zoning. So
Well,
I'm kind of going off.
No, I know when it was available to have some pot shops earlier, Smith River had 2, 3 starting up, and right downtown Smith River, and it's like, Jesus, more pot shops than grocery stores. Of course, we didn't have any at the time, but that's what I want to look at after, the people of Smith River, that, all the kids in Smith River grow up at Smith River School, and they can go to 3 pot shops but no grocery store, so, I just don't know if there's a number that we should look at. And another thing that you mentioned is county ordinances. Where can they be? So like if we decide that we think there should be 10, but is there even property to have 10? If it has to be out of commercial, out of coastal commission, has to be a recreation or a business licensed area or a specific county, designation. I mean, before we get jumping on things, we need to know our restrictions.
Yeah, I think there's room in terms of zoning for way more than what anybody wants. So I think it needs to be first recognized that no matter what anybody says, the cannabis market and industry is not a normal market. It's not a supply and demand market because of the federal prohibition. So even raw milk that's not legal in most states and in a lot of counties, there isn't a federal prohibition on it, although there is on transporting between the states. But because there's a blanket prohibition on cannabis, it makes it a totally distorted market and full of a lot of ignorant investment and such. And so there definitely needs to be like un-American style caps, I think, on the businesses in the beginning until such time that it becomes a normal trade that's legal federally. So absolutely, I think a solid number cap in the beginning. It doesn't have to mean that we pick a number, let's say we pick a number like 5. I don't think we make that permanent. We could say 5, I don't know how you can write ordinances with time frames in them, but I think it should be revisited, but I think we can start with a very small number, and then if there's obviously a problem with that being too little, then you revisit it. But I don't think we start with what we think is going to be the maximum number.
Would you identify those by geographic area, or would all 5 of them be in the Crescent City urban area?
Yeah, I don't think they need to be all concentrated in one zone.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an important point of conversation.
Yeah, I would certainly advocate for, like 1 in Klamath, 1 in Smith River, 1 up 199, and
Sure.
just kind of go
Sure.
like that.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to have them clumped up, really. I mean, I don't know. I don't really see the benefit in that, but I'm listening to anybody who thinks it's a good idea.
Well, also in picking out, first of all, I guess we have to decide the proper zoning. Second of all, what are the don'ts? What are the don'ts that we don't want?
Sure.
Do we want them around schools?
I'd like to talk
Do we
about
want
Highway
them-
101 first, because that's like most of the commercial, and that's like from a commercial standpoint, if you want to open a business, you probably want to be on the 101. Personally, I don't want to see any of it on the 101. So I don't know where that lands, but I'd like to see what other people think about it, not being on the 101.
The Del Norte Patients Together is in the process of either a second location or relocation to the highway. So we'll be putting in another application here pretty soon for the location across from Big Five. We don't plan any pot leaf signs or anything like that. I feel like I should recuse myself from some of this. I have kind of a personal, interest in it. I'll leave it there and see if anybody has anything to add.
I mean, I think we all generally have a personal, outlook to it, so I don't think you should have to recuse yourself. I think it actually gives you quite a unique perspective on it, and I think the community is a benefit for that. When it comes to the Highway 101 area, I mean, of course, we don't want to see it, congested with shops. I mean, we're all pretty aware of what we see in Brookings and what we see in Josephine County, and we know that's the kind of the standard bearer for what not to do. I think we're lucky to see those things because it's kind of puts it in the face of us so we can see it and we know what not to do. But I do believe that, if we put out the guidelines proper enough so that there's an understanding from the businesses and for the businesses that, our advertising isn't going to look like Brookings, I think it could be possible to benefit, for a 101 exchange with some commercial activity. I mean, obviously it's where most of our commercial land would be available. So to kind of prevent that, and what we'd be doing is maybe pushing those shops into the Smith River, space of Smith River instead of maybe on the outskirts of 101 where you don't have the children walking up and down the highway. I mean, if it's a concern from a community standpoint for children walking up and down the streets and seeing a pot shop, which I understand, we probably would want to consider then 101 because there's not a lot of foot traffic in the county space of 101. So that's just kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I think, we can't necessarily determine where businesses want to open up, but I think we can give general geographical, locations. I think Robert, was right on, one in Klamath, one in Smith River. But again, we don't want them in the town of Smith River next to the school or even within 600 feet of the school, when there's a better commercial spot maybe on the 101 exchange that allows for, prosperity for the business and for the community to just kind of ignore it.
I have two suggestions, I guess, and maybe a comment. Maybe talking about the number of shops is probably the last thing we should approach with the retail ordinance that we're talking about, just because it's probably the most controversial and hardest to determine. In my opinion, arbitrarily saying we're only going to allow one in Smith River and one in Klamath does not do business any favors. You're limiting business and you're not allowing business to function as a normal business would with competition. Additionally, and this is doesn't sound like the majority of the panel up here, but I have talked with many people, some of which are avid cannabis users and some of which use it not at all, and a lot of them don't have any issues with what Brookings looks like. I have a lot of people say they don't like the amount of business in Brookings. I see no issue with it whatsoever. Maybe that's, I can't tell you why that is, but a lot of people don't see that as any issue at all. It seems to be like business is working itself out. Competition is even. You don't have one monster shop making a killing of money. You have everybody, it's spread evenly. So just to give that opinion to this panel, that there are plenty of people out there that do not see that as an issue. And maybe we should focus first on questioning what are the state requirements within Prop 64 for these retail locations and deciding if we as a county want to expand upon those specifics, for example, school zones and the things that the state is already regulating?
I'll say that as far as, one store per area, I agree that that's kind of using the county's power to pick winners. You're right, it could. And I think there are a little more flexible ways, like alcohol, to limit over concentration. I don't know what's realistic. Heidi knows better than I do exactly how those alcohol restrictions work.
You're talking with ABC?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are based on census tract, and there's given a certain number, and if more than that number if you're requesting more than what has been allocated to your census tract, then there have to be findings that have to go before our planning commission to state that your one additional use is not going to create an undue burden on the community.
And the state designates what's appropriate for the census tract to begin with? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
There's language in a state law about issuing permits and concentration, and I think it's similar. I think it references census tract. I don't know if they have a set number that this is how many are allowed per population or whatever, but there's probably some way to interact with state law in a way that might help us. We can look into that.
Yeah, the states has what you're talking about, but they're still trying to develop a metric for that and how to calculate it. But they are intending to pay attention to concentrations and make sure it's not over concentrated in some areas, and then also conversely making sure that there aren't vast areas that are underserved, and intend to prioritize areas that are underserved for outlets.
Well, do we have any type of control of what happens in the city, the numbers in the city? I mean, the city's going to tell how many 10, whatever is going to be.
They're trying to pick a
They're going to pick their own number for the city. So when you go into Brookings, you see all these green X's. You're going to go in across the city and see them too. So, I mean,
All right, we got the city guy here to answer.
years. The city right now, what we're looking at is probably we'd roll out like an RFP process. So we would limit the amount of licenses that would come out each year. So maybe one year we would say we're going to issue 2 licenses. We'd put that RFP out. We'd invite people to come submit their applications. Those applications would be reviewed, and then, based on experience or business models, then we would choose the business that we felt would meet retail or manufacturing and invite them to come back for a full application. So rather than set a limit on how many we would allow, we just have put a process in place where we would meter the amount that would come out each year, and then we can, judge how that's impacting the community, or there's room for more or less, or that's what we've been talking about, and probably the direction we'll be moving.
I like that approach. I think that rather than trying to imagine what the whole thing is going to look like all at once, which I think is impossible, I think you need to take a sort of metered approach, which, I think that's a good way to do it.
So,
Round of public
Yes, sir.
comment on this, if that's all right with everyone. Hand up over here first. We'll let that go first, and then over here.
After talking lengthy
I think you're supposed to state your name.
Oh,
and
Patty
then
McCauley,
We'll do, so we'll do multiple rounds, and so we'll just do like maybe instead of one time 3 minutes, maybe we'll do like a minute and a half, and then we can do a couple of rounds. That sounds fair for everyone.
I'm Patty McCauley. I own RCC, Patient Resource Center. I work for Safe Access Now, and I work for John Ferry Law Offices. After a lengthy conversation with most of the Board of Supervisors, and drawn-out conversation over many months. They really don't have an issue with it as long as it's out of the mainstream view because of the people that don't like it. So they were advocating for no 101 access for collective store shops. I am in a commercial building. We are zoned commercial out on North Crest, 1890 North Crest Avenue. And we are within, state allows 600 feet from a school. We're 1,000 feet from any school in any direction.
All right, thank you. Public comment.
Dave Mason, resident of the county. So, yeah, trying to picture it as the whole thing all at once is impossible because it's in flux. It's, like you said, building a rocket ship while we're flying it, and it's challenging. The standards for liquor stores includes a whole bunch of stuff for lighting, security, and it'd be real easy to mirror those, I would think, because they're already established and easy to copy and paste. As far as the number, I really like what the city's talking about. Do an RFP, you want a permit, submit your proposal, where it is you want to put it, all that stuff, send it to the planning commission. Either it makes sense or it doesn't. Go and do. And then if there's a problem, okay, well, we're not doing that again because look at what happened with, or hey, that worked, let's do this some more, right? So that gives you a way to ease into it without, because honestly, the restrictions on liquor stores aren't that strict, but they're reasonable, which is really what we're all trying to get to, is reasonable regulation so that it doesn't have a negative impact and has a positive impact. And people I've spoken to a lot of people on both sides of the issue. The main concern with the retail outlets is perception of the congregation of the customers driving away other business from adjacent businesses. That seems to be the common perception, the common worry. So there's that. As far as keeping it away from where children tend to gather, I don't know anybody that as a youth didn't hang out by a liquor store to try to find somebody old enough to go in and make a purchase for them. Having it in a location where kids kind of hang out anyway kind of promotes that. I mean, kids are going to get it if they're going to get it, but you shouldn't make it too easy for them. It's like, find an adult to go down to the store and don't hang out in front of the store pestering adults. Right? That's my only comments on that one.
Thank you.
Edward Horse Aubrey, Yurok Tribe Council for North District. And as for the 101 in Smith River, that would not work because it has to be on the 101 for the fact that everything else is residential. And if you open a shop in Klamath, they'd have to work with the Yurok Tribe.
Thank you. All right. So some of my thoughts on just with the 101 deal and was the idea of signage. And so we thought, oh, we'll just take care of it with signage restrictions. But then talking with county council is may not be as easy as it sounds. It sounds like all the commercial speech isn't the same as personal free speech, but it's still protected in some ways. So you can't just make blanket statements like no signage. I don't really know all the details about how that works. If you want to make restrictions, you have to enumerate exactly all the things that it can't be, or maybe you can just restrict it by size, and maybe that's legitimate. So I think that's probably a big concern for a lot of people, really, where the thing is, and many of them probably is less a concern about what it looks like and whether or not you even know it's there. So what options do we have with that?
Signage is a big issue, and one that we'll probably spend a lot of time talking about before this is done. It is a free speech issue. There's also issues of, are we going to be able to, or is it prudent to try to hold cannabis to a different standard than other businesses? And those are all things that could land us in court. So it's something that we'll get into, and you know, I'll have to do a ton more research on the issue, but, you know, we can limit time, place, and manner of signs, but we can't be arbitrary. So we can't probably do something for cannabis that we don't do for another thing, except maybe, you know, maybe no pot leaves might be valid, but making a retail dispensary have a smaller sign than, you know, some other store might not be. Those are things that we'd have to get into in time.
One question I have, because I don't know anything about it, this must be a federal or state restriction on cigarette advertisements? Is that true? Is there some type of billboarding, you know?
I would guess there's both state and federal, but I don't know. Heidi might better. You know, the kind of connection between cigarettes or liquor and cannabis, I think, is one we'd have to kind of proactively argue if we wanted to use that argument. There are some things at the state level that would help us, but you know, it's just kind of a big Wild West situation that anything we do, I'd want to take a real close look at and be real careful about.
I wanted to ask, of course, you made a comment up here, and maybe you're not prepared to answer this question at all in any way, but you mentioned that if anybody wanted to work in Klamath, they needed to work with the Yurok tribe. Not that they wouldn't want to be working with the Yurok tribe, but is it, as representative of Tribal Council for Yurok tribe, your intent to exhort your jurisdiction over all county properties within Klamath? Within your tribal territory within Klamath? I'm not exactly. Sure, I'm not 100% clear on exactly where all the tribal territory exactly is, but
well, the reservation, even if it is county, you know, if there's like a road or fence to get done, right?
sure.
Still have to come to the tribe, within the 1 mile of the tribal jurisdiction.
Trying to think of the proper name of the store. I wanted to, it's the Renner Station by Trees of Mystery. That is within the area? Yeah. Mhm. I was just wondering because, you know, it's technically this entire county is tribal territory, and I was just wondering what your guys' position was on that because I heard the comment, so I was wondering.
I spoke a bit with Ellie Hoops and trying to formally get her on the group. I'm not sure where that is in the process, but I'm definitely looking forward to having her and whoever else directly, and I would, if it ever becomes possible, like to participate in your working groups also in the future.
Well, I was just listening to everybody and the value of saving us some time. Maybe we could get what the state regulates in Prop 64, what the county requirements are as far as, you know, everything. Well, I mean, everybody should have a copy of that so that we're not talking about something, you know, and what's our don'ts, you know, the schools, the district. I like Dave's idea of, you know, copy and paste is easy to do. If you have all these things, just start copying and pasting it.
There's just not a lot there, unfortunately. It leaves a lot up to the county, because that's the traditional role of the county and the community development is zoning and community development, and that's where the rubber meets the road, really. And so there's some basic stuff from the state, but I was just looking through to see if they had any mention of signage. I don't see even a mention of it, period. So things like that, they're just left completely up to the localities.
Well, I guess that first I mean, we keep talking about schools, right? And the state in there, I think it says 600 feet if I'm correct. And
I
so,
think you're right.
Does anybody know, and this is because blocks are different, more or less, are we talking about 250, 300 feet for a city block in the area or in Smith River or whatnot? I'm just trying to get a visual a sense of how far away. Is it 2-3 blocks from a school then?
Yes. 600 feet's not that far.
That's what I'm saying, and so should we as a county, that would be the first thing, it's in the state requirements, should we as
can
a county?
increase that, for sure.
Should we as a county say it needs to be further? Do we think 3 blocks is okay from a school? I'm thinking Smith River, because I grew up in Smith River, you know, is it okay that there's a cannabis store between Smith River and the Grange Hall in Smith River, and that's not very far. Every kid walks by it every day to go to school. Should it be 1,000 feet? Should it be 2,000 feet? Should it be 20 blocks equivalent? That's a question, I guess. And what we're doing has no effect within the city. This is just for outside in the county. And when we're talking about Klamath, Klamath may be a little bit different because the school is somewhat secluded for the most part. Smith River, any Gasky, maybe these should be further restrictions from schools in those zones, because in those residential areas, many children are walking longer distances to get to school or riding their bikes. So, you know, I'd be a proponent of saying that we should have maybe equivalent to 5 to 10 block radius from schools at minimum.
If you do something like that in Fort Dick, you don't have one. Which may be good, but, you know.
Well, not necessarily. You just don't have one by the store. You know, if you have a 10-block radius in Fort Dick, you could have a facility could be, you know, could be on Lower Lake area, could be past the prison somewhere, you know. What designates the area of Fort Dick, I'm unclear of to begin with. I mean, it does have its own zip code, I believe, but.
For me, we're far enough away from the school. Patty is, you know, it's not a huge issue. And then on the other hand, you know, it kind of comes down to, like, you know, we had some public comment, you know, about like the kind of people that might go to these kinds of places, and it kind of gets back to, you know, whether a second-class person uses the establishment. You know, and the reality of it, if we get away from our feelings, you know, these places, we're required to have like 1,200 by 800 DPI. I don't know, I'm not a technician, but it's a lot, and it ends up being that you need like 16 terabytes to store it for 90 days, you know, the surveillance.
Right.
And it makes a safer neighborhood. There's studies that were done in the Sacramento area. Of course, they were always put into these poor neighborhoods to begin with. But, you know, lighting and cameras, you know, does, you know, bring safety, you know, that, in that respect, if maybe a retailer was respectful of, you know, their appearance and not looking like, you know, the bong and porn shop, or but I guess then you get back to you know, what you can, the signage is okay and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would think get back to the spacing from schools, daycares, things like that. I mean, I'd be a proponent of increasing the 600-foot setback myself. You know, I mean, I think 1,000 foot it's pretty much kind of a standard throughout the state for most local jurisdictions. They've kind of bumped the local the state mandate of 600 feet up to 1,000 feet. Because again, I mean, a city block is, you know, about 200 foot roughly, dependent. And I mean, you know, 2 to 3 blocks does seem to be a little close, particularly when we're dealing with smaller cities that we have, you know, on the outskirts of our county area. You know, Gasky's not necessarily a problem because the mountain school's on the other side of the river and there's no commercial, you know, operations over on that side. There's no commercial zone, you know, Hiuchi, those things. But yeah, I could see that being an issue in Smith River and things like that. So I would be a proponent of bumping it up.
Do we have to have one distance for every place, everywhere? Or can we have different distances for different operations or different locations?
You know, I think the big picture is we can have different rules for different areas, but we kind of get into sub-area planning and the general plan and kind of big picture stuff that, you know. Heidi, what do you think?
I would prefer it would be the same. I mean, for all. And one thing I was going to suggest is if there is some temporary consensus at looking at 1,000, we can go and look at all the schools that are in the unincorporated county and compare them to where we have commercial zones, which I think, I would assume that's where we're headed, would be to allow the retail sales and not allow them in residential
We could
zones and so
generate a
on.
map maybe where we could see things visually.
Yeah, I think that'd be a
Could
great
we
idea.
do a map that has all the commercial zones and then schools? And I think the state law is not just schools, it's daycare centers, it might even be churches, I can't remember all the things on the list, churches.
We would definitely be able to do the retail, I mean, the commercial zoning, and we would be able to do the schools, because those are mostly identified as public facilities in our general plan. But as far as the daycares and those, I'm unsure of the locations.
You know, if we could look at a map and kind of see where, you know, where is 1,000 feet from all the things in a commercial zone, it might really narrow the discussion, right? It might hardly be any, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, from the city's perspective, they, you know, Eric Taylor had drawn out a map of all the commercial zones in the different places, and I'll tell you what, visually it did help. It helps out to just really get an idea and a view of, you know, the spaces that we've got.
Another variable here with the retail, I went to the city planning commission meeting and listened in, and they're getting right in on the discussion of on-site consumption in their retail outlets, which makes it really, to me, a totally different business with different concerns, if anybody has any. So, you know, as far as where they are, it's really a different animal to me.
I don't think there's anything in the state Prop 64 laws that are talking about specifically to on-site consumption, right? Yeah, it allows for it, but it doesn't say like, I guess there's not any specific restrictions on it necessarily.
I don't
right?
think that there's a state level permit for it yet. It does, I think, just leave the door open.
From what my understanding, it just allows a local jurisdiction to approve it. There is no separate permitting process through the state. It's specifically left over to a local jurisdiction.
Well, I drive from Smith River to Brookings, and on Friday nights, the little pot shop at the border has their barbecue out there, and they're smoking and having burgers and having a party. So, I mean, is that something that we all want?
That wouldn't be allowed under state law in California.
Okay.
It'd be like, there is a bill actually in the state to deal with temporary events on private property, so that would come down as a temporary event type thing.
Yeah, but I think from the state standpoint, it's a visual aspect, nothing in public. That can be from public view. Yeah, exactly. And you know, in relation to what Jesse had just mentioned about the private event planning or event permit, yeah, basically the parameters of that's, you know, are pretty small in detail so far, but it'd be out of public view. So it would be a private property, it would have to be behind a fence in a secure zone.
I think you made a good point, Jesse, and it might be an important part to put, at least in an initial ordinance, is yes or no to on-site consumption at the retail shop. And obviously, yes makes it more wide open, and no, at least initially, starts it to be a little more restrictive. And you know, it's probably a lot easier if you're going to write an ordinance, if you're going to put something like that in there, that you go with the no side, because you can always open it up down the line. When you start with the yes side, you know, then it becomes harder to reel it back in.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much division around this topic that you have to do things a little at a time. You know?
You'd probably get a lot more overall buy-in if we put in the ordinance no on-site consumption at the retail facilities, at least in the beginning of this.
Well, I don't know, Robert, do they allow it in medical?
You know, we assumed now that we probably could just let people smoke in the shop if we wanted, but then we'd be violating the California Clean Air Act. We'd be, you know, allowing kind of loitering that we might not want. There's a legal protection for bars. You can't sue a bar because the bar gets you drunk and you go kill people. Doesn't exist for cannabis use on site, you know? So there's lots of liability there. So then to get around the California Clean Air Act, what would you do? Edibles? And then that's even probably more dangerous because, you know, an hour later, all of a sudden you're driving and yeah, it hits you then. So we've opted to not do it. You know, I would like to see a future where it's allowed, but I mean, there are, you know, like, you know, the obvious hurdles with, I mean, just with the liability of, you know, I mean, I guess you could have outside, you know, it'd be nice if maybe we factored into an ordinance where, you know, to, you know, like the beach, things like that, you know, if you're far enough away from, you know, there should be places where people can consume it. Our organization, you know, has decided not to, you know, we don't want anybody consuming it there. But
I think that's smart. I think there's just too many things to learn still about it. It's such a new area legally. Nobody knows, you know, where the law comes down on anything. So I think it's err on the side of caution is smart.
So we've talked about school zoning, the possibility for consumption, no consumption. I think in the rules there, in the state regulations, there's video surveillance type stuff written into the rules, right? Are we all, and I don't know the specifics on all of them, but is there some, are we comfortable with how the state is regulating that? I would think so, yes, because it seems to be quite further than any other industry is regulated.
Yeah, the security regulations for, I mean, particularly retail, I believe there's a mandate for an on-site security guard during hours of operation. Security cameras, you couldn't walk a foot around one of these places without actually being on camera. So I think there's sufficient.
So it sounds like, at least as board, I don't know about you guys, Blake and whatnot, I think that the video requirements, the surveillance requirements, the security requirements are quite good for these facilities, already in place by the state, so probably as a county, we don't necessarily need to be looking into further regulating that.
I didn't agree on that, but it would still also be nice to have what those state regulations are, what those zone regulations are, and then as we talk, we can say, no, we can do this.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff here, but it's just, it's not organized into an outline type form. We could maybe twist somebody's arm to do that, or I could do it.
And that map would be real nice too, from like a county perspective, where it would be legal and what zonings,
Right.
and, you know, the corridors of 101 and the towns of Smith River, Fort Dick, and maybe Klamath, and we know we have obstacles with the tribe in the Klamath that everybody's pretty much under their jurisdiction, but
Community development can provide maps, and we can provide zoning text for our existing commercial zone designations. I would just need to know which meeting you want it for, so we could have it packaged.
Another question might be because we're kind of, you know, polling ideas here, but is there a thought of the size of the retail facility that could be restricted? I'm just thinking, for example, and this is a little bit out of the blue, a super mega cannabis shop opens up with a 25,000 square foot facility, right? Like, do we want to, not necessarily the size of the building, but the size of the retail floor?
Is that legal?
Right?
Can you do that?
I don't know.
Truthfully, I mean, a 25,000 square foot pot shop's not going to open up here. We just don't have the consumption capacity here. I mean, LA, San Francisco, larger metropolitan areas, I mean, you know, obviously a large scale pot shop's probably going to go through the roof. But here,
It also, but that depends on the county's ordinance.
I see what you're
Because if the
saying.
county is so, and this is all theoretical, right? It's so unrestrictive that it behooves a business to move here so that they can do, you know, telesales. You know, a lot of people are mailer, you know,
With all the
sending
101 traffic,
product
there's
out
a big
from their
incentive to
businesses.
dominate it. I mean, that was my mood, and I had the millions. I would try to dominate the traffic market here and open up a huge shop that has a giant parking lot that can take every single tourist that comes through here and have the best prices and drive everyone else out of business and own the place. That totally could happen. So I think it totally makes sense to try to find legal ways to avoid that stuff, and Yeah, that's what's happening everywhere, and that's why there's 40 counties that have bans, and a lot of those aren't even thinking about doing this, because there's all these demons in the closet. You gotta watch out for.
You know, I appreciate the, you know, the counterpoint to that in your opinions, but I truly think that, you know, market dictates size. No matter what we do from a county's perspective, it will never prevent consolidation. You can limit the size of every single pot shop in this county, but at one point or another, if they're not successful, they'll be bought up by one other individual, and then you'll have what you didn't want, but you'll just have it on a scale of one company owns 7 of the pot shops in the county.
If that happens
So-
naturally over time, then
But
so
the
be it.
reality is we're still talking about a natural progression of growth. I mean, you're not going to get somebody in here with a number of this county, with our potential for the sales that we've got, who's going to open up one large pot shop and just dominate the industry. I just don't see
I
that
am.
happening.
What are you talking about? I just said I'm going to do it. So you're not listening to what I'm saying. Okay?
Jesse, I would appreciate if you did it, because I'd love to see it happen, truthfully.
Oh, it
But
would be awful.
Because I don't think you'd be successful. That's what I'm trying to say.
It doesn't matter if you think it'd be successful or not. Even if the metrics say I'm totally going to fail, there's people who love to gamble with this stuff. There's people who love to mess with people's lives.
You're
That's what
missing
they
my
do.
point, Jesse. You're missing my point. My point is that is still not going to prevent that one person from coming in and buying 6 licenses.
But at
from
least
you.
that happens
That's
over
the
time.
point.
At least that happens
No,
over
you don't
time.
understand, Jesse. That could happen immediately.
Well,
There is no
okay,
limit
sure.
on the amount of licenses that Robert can pull or myself can pull. I could pull 10 licenses today and buy up every single commercial building I wanted to today and own the business in the industry here. That's the reality. So I don't think we should be getting caught on trying to limit sizes of these operations. We want to promote growth from a business perspective, but we also want to try to control it. But I just don't think that, you know, assuming a 25,000 square foot pot shop's going to open up and it's going to dominate our market, I just don't think that's going to happen.
Well, the state doesn't limit the number of permits you can hold. We can. And should.
So,
We shouldn't have one person or entity owning all of the retail shops.
I think there's mechanisms to prevent market domination. I think that what you're saying, the forces are there, but I think saying that we can't do anything to prevent it, or we shouldn't, I think isn't the right way to go.
Totally. And I guess to clarify what I meant by that is I don't know if we should be considering limiting the size of a retail space, because then that limits, you know, like what if I wanted, I mean, I have a building in mind that I mean, if I had my druthers, I'd lease or purchase right now, and it's outside of Smith River. It's a fairly large retail space with a couple extra buildings on it. You know, so are you going to tell me that I can buy that whole place, but then I can only open 1,000 square foot of my storefront? That seems like we're you know, going past what we should be doing.
I just think in this totally unnatural market, I think unnatural things like that, un-American things like that, things that I hate as a libertarian and a business guy who rolls my eyes at government regulations. This is not a normal business. This is not a normal market. You can't keep thinking of it like
so
that.
let me weigh in here quickly, and I'm enjoying this, but I'd like to take you back to maybe the first meeting where, you know, it was decided that you guys all get cozy chairs and I have to sit in this blue one.
It's because you were late, Blake. You were 30 minutes late.
Oh, that was it. Anyhow, that was just a joke. I like where we're going here in terms of we've got four things on the table that we're trying to discuss. 4 points of you know, decisions to be made: distance from the school, you know, the on-site consumption or not, and then video and lighting kind of requirement. And those are good. And then this one here is the size of the space. And I guess I would be an advocate for the size of the space. Going back to the original comments that I had that basically said that we're trying not to be Humboldt County, we're trying not to be Brookings, because there's inherently something wrong with those two places. I can't put my finger on it. It's a philosophical point of view. But I think enough of us agree to that, again, we're trying to put boxes around what we do here in Delaware County and somewhat limit the explosion of us becoming the bullseye with the big green target. And so with that in mind, you know, Eric, you got to kind of have compromises to something. It's not 1,000 square feet, but it might be 3,000 or 2,000 or something, right? I believe that would be the right direction to go. We can change it later, but in the meantime, we want to send some signals out that, we're trying to be wise stewards of our marijuana policy through this ordinance.
I would tend to agree with the size limitation, I suppose. I mean, hearing everybody's view, I'm not, again, let me clarify my point, my stance. I'm not for a 25,000 square foot Walmart box store, for sure. I mean, that never would I ever be. But I do believe that, if we're going to talk about limiting the retail space of, say, the cannabis distribution point from a retail standpoint, we need to consider the fact that some of these retail places may want to open up a separate merchandising space where, you're selling some merchandise because you're trying to build a brand, you're trying to be legitimate. And I guess my concern would be that potential limitations. If we could somehow set forth a parameter or, a general outline of, okay, if we're going to limit the size of the actual retail dispensing space of the retail area, we would need to allow for an allotment of a separate merchandising space. I do believe through the state they are requiring a separation of the retail dispensing area of the product versus your merchandising area. So as long as we realize that, I mean, I'm for limiting. I don't want to see a 5,000
Yeah, there's
square foot shop
separations
either.
between the access area and your business operations area. So you could have a 10,000 square foot warehouse where you do all your operations, and then you have a 1,500 square foot limited access retail area.
Okay.
And that sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
That's
I'm
all
for
fits
that,
in there.
definitely.
But the RFP process of easing into things, I think, takes care of a lot of this. I don't know, where the discretion lies with that, though, sometimes, that's where, like, the envelopes of money come in, if it's just a couple of people in a closed room deciding, it's, like, less transparent, and there's less checks than if you just have it in the ordinance that it can't get any bigger. The ordinance can always be changed. If you got a good plan and you want to come to the county and say, I want to do this, then you start talking about changing the ordinance. I think maybe that's how that works. I don't know.
I think that's a legitimate concern. Who in the county is going to be making these decisions? Whose job is it to pick the winners? How much time is that going to take? The permit fee would have to be high enough to cover the time it takes to dig through somebody's thing. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try or look at it or think about it or poke at it, but a real concern is both staff time and then accountability and who wants to put their name on picking the permits.
Well, the bottom line also, kind of jumping all around here, but now we're back to the RFP, which Eric had mentioned, and that probably brings forward the number of shops again, right? Like, because if you're talking about that, you're talking about a limited number, at least for an initial request for proposal on that. It all boils down to whether we put a number or RFP, all that stuff. How do you pick? How do you choose? And so you're going to have to come up with some parameters on how you choose these things, because otherwise, you put it out to the county. Hey, we've got 3 months open window to apply. Well, and we're only picking 2, or we're only picking 4. Well, you're going to get 50 applications maybe, and then how do you pick? So, well, putting any number on it, any way you put that number on it, there's a requirement to choose. It can't just be, and maybe it could, but it shouldn't just be first come, first serve. Oh, you're the 3 winners, you get the shop, right?
I think a lot of local jurisdictions are doing a kind of a point system, a scoring system. Now, how that scoring system's developed, I think, is fairly unique to each individual jurisdiction. They're kind of, their target priorities are then given a scoring chart. The RFP is given to, the staff of the county, whoever's making those decisions, and then they go through those packets and they score them based off of those priorities. And then, if you get 50 and you're only going for, say, 5, you whittle down. And then those are, after you get, say, you get 10 of those 50 that score within your basis for minimum, you bring them in, you interview them.
So the whole thing needs to be super transparent. So that was my gripe with other localities. And the thing that Blake, you're talking about, not being able to put your finger on what's wrong with a lot of these municipalities, like, to me, that's what it is. It's the lack of transparency, and it creates all this suspicion. There's a huge controversy in Humboldt where the municipal water board is up there yelling, don't approve this permit, and the planning commission's all split, and and the big investor there who wants to make it happen is flying supervisors to RCRC events, and the whole thing stinks, and it looks super corrupt, and you're wondering who's getting paid what, you know, and you never know how it all works in the end. And it's really, I don't know if any of those things are true, but it sure kind of looks like it. And so I don't know enough about how government works to how you set it up with the maximum amount of transparency. And that's what I'd like to see somehow. I don't know.
We can do it if we're smart. I mean, the requirements in the RFP, the things we lay out, if we set out the standards they're going to be and how we're going to measure them, we can do it. It's just, that's a lot of work. It'd be better if the marketplace made those decisions instead of us, because the marketplace can't get sued and we can. So there's got to be a balance between us having some discretion and some control, and us not having 100% liability and responsibility for what happens.
And if the marketplace is going to make its choice, then that boils back down to putting any number, any limited number on this doesn't allow the market to make its choice.
Can't let the
You know,
cannabis
so if we're
market
gonna
make
put-
its choice. It's not.
Yeah, if you're going to put a number on it, then it all eventually has to be chosen in some shape or form by the county. If you're going to say 8, and we have 3 months to pick, and you get more than 8, then there's going to have to be a mechanism by which the county picks
There's
what 8.
lotteries. I think they're stupid, but
Maybe
some places do lotteries.
You have a
and that's-
minimum,
That seems terrible, but-
criteria that you have to meet on a scoring system, and then when you have more people that meet that minimum criteria, then maybe it's a lottery. You've met the criteria, now we pull your name out of a hat, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, that kind of idea, you know, floats. At least it gives, you know, it gives the one thing with just doing a lottery, I mean, you know, you could end up the first pick in the draft or whatever is the worst operator we've ever had. So, I mean, those are the concerns with the lottery. But, you know, to bring those two together, I mean, that's a possibility to think about, because, you know, you would basically get everybody who's applied, they've gone through the scoring chart for the RFP. And then at that point, it really could be just kind of a luck of the draw, and you're either in it or out. I will say from you know, a perspective, you know, RFP proposal person, whenever that date may or may not come, you know, I'd be pretty bummed out to get to the point of having to spend all of the, you know, and it would just be a personal hit, you know, spend all the money to build an RFP, get together all the business operational procedures and whatnot, and then have to go through a lottery thing and lose out in the end. I mean, that just doesn't sound,
That's
doesn't
why I
sound very
always
free
hated it,
market to
too.
me.
That's how Washington did it. You
Oh, I know,
and
trust me.
You know all about it.
I know all about that, and it literally, you know, I mean, Washington's going through its doldrums right now. It's on the 5-year mark. It's got, you know, it's having its inherent issues right now. But again, I can say that from a perspective of, you know, of that, it hurt some businesses, and it you know, it benefited others. I don't know if there was really a consensus as to that was the greatest thing that they were able to do. What they did do is by doing that, they created a complete lack of production for the market, which increased costs. And the retail markets went crazy because they were able to charge exorbitant amounts for their products the first 2 years, because there was a lack of actual cultivators on the market who could supply the chain. So, you know, I don't know if that was a benefit to anybody.
I think if you know, when we get a map to look at, it might become clear that the available space to do it in is not such that we need to limit it, right? We might only have narrow available space anyway, and then we wouldn't have to deal with the situation. That's my hope.
You know, going back to self-interested, but, you know, the proposals and all, I think Redwood Coast Collective and Delmar Patients together, you know, we need to have something on there where we're grandfathered in, you know. We certainly should be prioritized. There was a caveat in state law that we would be prioritized by state law, and that's been kind of shuffled over by temporary licenses and things like that. But it'd be nice if our community, you know, lived up to the spirit of what we voted on, which was that the organizations that were in compliance with state law, which both of our organizations have been, would be prioritized in for licensing. Other than, you know, caps and whatnot, you know, we're board, we decided we should have a consensus on things. You know, if we would throw some numbers out there, you know, for what we're talking about, maybe we'll see if we could, you know, get somewhere with that. I'm not sure.
A lot of other localities did give priority to stuff that was existing, and I talked to council about how that could be done. It's in a lot of county and city codes. They went back in time quite far to operations that were registered with the state in some way as a collective and said, we're only dealing with these right now for this year, and then we're opening it up later. And then, but county council seemed uncomfortable with that idea generally.
It's not a deal breaker or anything. I don't love going back in time and seeing who's got what paperwork at what point in time. If we were going to do that, we should make that time limit like right now.
I think we should do something like that. I think we should, all the advice from all the other growers associations who are working with communities, and the one that comes to mind the most is Calaveras, where he keeps telling me, you have to put a moratorium on things. You have to cap things now. This was a conversation I had with him 1.5 years ago because of what happened in Calaveras. This is coming from the Cultivators Association. You have to rein it in. Otherwise, as soon as the word gets out that it's open, it becomes a mess, and it becomes very difficult to limit it. So I'd like to see some dates put down now to limit new collective operations from trying to grandfather themselves in.
Well, I mean, if we go back to the state guidelines, they had initially said it was January 1st of 2016. Then they bumped that up to September, I believe.
Well, these are
4th of
that's just priority of state
2016.
licensing.
Those were priority. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, if we wanted to judge off that, that's a starting point
Right,
we could
right,
start
okay,
with.
so you're saying, yeah.
Because a lot of people formed collectives at that point or prior to that. I mean, if we could go back farther, you know, I don't know what benefit it would be to go back super far. I don't know how, you know, I'm sure Robert himself's been formed for a while. Penny's been formed for a while. I've been formed for a couple of years.
I mean, if we do it now, that's fine. I mean, county council was saying we do it at the point of an ordinance, but if that's going to take 3 more months, you know, or a year, you know, that's too long, you know. So I don't think we need to necessarily go back way in time. It could be the first of this year if you wanted to go back a little bit, but I just think we need to stop the clock on it in some way.
I'll look at it. I'll think more deeply about it.
Should we talk about taxes in the last half hour, or should we just keep going with this?
Let's start. Let's open the conversation on taxes because
Okay.
it's a big conversation. Like it's a long conversation. And there's a lot of moving parts to taxation. There's different kinds of taxes. There's what's gone on in other jurisdictions. There's a lot of examples out there. There's a lot of data out there about taxes. I think a fundamental question that should be answered first is it of value that's important to the group to tax? Because if it's not, let's not waste a lot of time on it. You know, if it's more important to allow operating to happen at the lowest cost to the operator so that we get people out of the black market, you know, we can wait on a tax. If it's important to limit the kind of irresponsible knucklehead investment so that, you know, we don't get flooded, then maybe a tax as a price floor or something is important. You know, those are things.
Joel, could you tell us where, I guess, current state and county rules or law would tax it at this point? And so then when you're talking just now, it's really over and above that, right?
Right now, there's $9.25 on buds and $2.25 on everything else.
It amounts to about a 20% of gross tax on the cultivation.
That's on the cultivator, and then dried weight ounce.
Just to simplify it, it's about 20% of the gross is about what that cultivation tax comes up. It's the state, it's right off the top of the gross. It
And
goes
then
to the
there's a
state.
15% excise tax that's collected by the distributor, I believe. And then there's sales tax on non-medical, adult use. I think, you know, to total up what that is in total tax, I think depends on what your price is, and that's always been difficult for me to pin down. But that's substantial. It's something like 25 or 30% tax overall, maybe higher.
40.
Yeah, well, yeah, 20 and 15, but then, so there's, I think I'm correct, there's no actual state tax coming out at the retail level, right? Other than sales tax, other than existing sales tax would
Well,
have.
that's actually the excise tax. It's an excise tax on the retail collected by the distributors? Or is Robert knows?
So we've had, the transition period, so we have to tax, the excise tax has to be collected on everything we've had on inventory, despite the fact that there was no distributor collecting the excise tax, and we're supposed to just get that to a licensed distributor. And now everything that's coming in is coming in with a 24% tax, which is to reflect the market rate at 15% at retail. Which is kind of a longer story about how they calculate that.
Yeah, that's,
But,
I'd like to get into that on what this kind of fair market value number is. And it's not actually what was sold for.
We're simply collecting, we're keeping our rates the way they have been, and we're collecting almost 23% for the excise and the sales tax. And so I did want to make the point that, we're taxed enough, and
Well,
I'm
but-
okay with
so
taxes in general.
Because in the future scenario, when the distributor is in place, the distributor is paying a tax, passing it along to the retail facility, right? And then the retail facility is more than likely adding that on, even though you're not
Correct,
technically
correct.
paying it to the state, you've
Yeah.
paid it to the distributor who's paid it to the
Right.
state, and you're just collecting your money back,
The state's
essentially.
not paying attention to the price that the retailer is paying it for. The state's collecting that excise tax on the wholesale price plus 60%.
But as the producer, you're paying a tax directly to the state. And as the
Yeah.
distributor, you're paying a tax
Well, not
directly to the
directly. It all goes through the distributor. It all goes through the distributor, and then who pays the tax, right? Corporations don't pay tax. They just collect tax from their customers and send it to the government, right? So who actually pays it is sort of a semantic thing, really, but it's the distributor collects all the taxes.
Yeah, and Robert makes a point of, we're taxed enough already, and I get that. I don't like lots of tax either. But we're a board representing the county, right, as a whole. And the county, very roughly, voted 60% in favor of Prop 64 and 40% not in favor of Prop 64. So Prop 64 has built into the fact that what you voted on was that the county has the ability to pull tax. And so we are tasked with putting a county tax in place because, 40% of the people don't want this, but I bet you those 40% of the people, if they were told it's going to happen, they would say, well, at least we're going to get some money for it.
Yeah, it's a good selling point, for
And
sure.
the 60% of people who voted for this, some of those people maybe didn't want the tax, they just wanted the cannabis. But I would venture to guess at least half, if not more, of those 60% wanted the tax as well. So we're dealing with 75 maybe, or an overwhelming majority of this county that wants to see this county receive tax benefit to this scenario. So we need to be putting a beneficial tax in place that comes back to this county. That's what our residents voted for. Whether or not we personally want to see it or not, maybe makes no difference. It's what we're trying to put in place that benefits the county that the voters voted on. So I think we should be putting, hey, arbitrary numbers we just talked about, 35, 40% tax going to the state, 5, 10% additional tax to the county. I'm just throwing that out there.
We're able to apply for grants from the surplus of the taxes that they collect that goes to certain, certain allocated funds and whatnot. But there will be a surplus, and by us having an ordinance that allows every part of the industry, we'll be able to apply for certain grants based on that. When we add the sales tax in, the county, I would argue that I don't think people voted to add an additional tax to it. They voted for the base tax, and then the law does allow the counties to add taxes to it. But I mean, these are the guys that are paying, this tax, so then you have to ask, where do you want to get this money? Do you want to get it from manufacturing? And then you're making us an uncompetitive manufacturing place, So we're talking about retail, and we're just getting it from ourselves, and they're already paying, almost 23%, and we got to ask ourselves, obviously this costs money, I don't think it needs to cost as much, but I mean, it costs money what we're doing here, I guess we have to recoup it. I don't think that the person that comes into my shop should be paying any more than they already are.
Sure, and
That's medical, that's to be
the
clear.
taxes that you're talking about right now, that's the state. The state's doing that. It's part of the Prop 64. It was built into it. And I guess, not to sound, not concerning, but that's life now. And within this, the county has to get something, and the county can't be hoping that they're going to get approved for a grant or hoping that the state is going to kick them back some dollars down the line.
Yeah.
I would think that every point at which the state is taxing, whatever their percentage should be, the county should go back in and that same method, add on some portion of a county tax in each one of those methods. I don't know, but
Let's
I
make a
just
distinction
threw out
here first.
I just threw out an arbitrary number there that if you're saying that the overall tax position of the state is 35 to 40% of the chain, the county should be coming in at somewhere between 5 or 10% of that chain. That was what I had said earlier.
I think
a little
that's
too
just
much.
too much.
That
I
puts
mean,
it up at 50, 60%.
I was going to say,
already.
what we have to do, if we want to do something like this from a county's perspective, let's go and we need to investigate the other counties. Because there are counties in California that have initiated their own tax. And I'll tell you what, most of them are between 1 and under 2%. So, when we start talking about 5%, that's your survivability as a business. I mean, all of our businesses, even your business, Kurt, and your business, Blake, live off of 5%. And that's, if we can just realize that for one moment. I realize that cannabis for everybody seems to think that it's going to be the saving grace. It's going to dip the county out of, its poverty level. But I'm telling you, the more we expect from the industry, the more likely we're going to fail, and we'll have what we don't want. And we just need to realize that, this is new. It's fresh. And I realize trust me, I do know that the people voted for a tax, and we do need to benefit from the county. But there are other ways and other avenues to gain that extra 3% or 4% that we may want.
I'll just pose a ridiculous question. So if you're in business and tomorrow the state proposes or the county proposes to raise the sales tax by 5%, are you out of business? No. You're passing that on to the customer. This is a tax that gets passed on to the customer.
At 5%.
You might be, but at the same time, this is a
Security
tax,
guards.
and the taxes are passed down the line. And, yeah, okay, maybe 2%, maybe that's appropriate. I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number proportionate to what the state is already taxing this business at. And whatever you put in that initial package, that's what's going to dictate the market.
Let's make a distinction here between
and
medical
purchasing retail cannabis in this county, a few more percent on the price isn't going to drive 100% of the market out of the county, let's say. Maybe there's a handful of people that will go somewhere to get a better price, but a handful of more percent on the bottom line isn't going to eliminate sales, let's say.
Right, that's how it is. I've been in business my whole life. I've been in manufacturing where you're crushing it if you're making 1 or 2%. That's how real business is. And so, when I see the cannabis industry, making 80% and complaining because I got to give up another 10, it's really a bunch of baloney. It's not like the cannabis industry is flush with cash, but the people who are in it don't understand how business actually works. So there's also a difference between medical and recreational. Right now, we're talking about what are the medical sales? Who are we taxing? We're taxing ourselves, right? That doesn't help. But when this opens up to recreational, it's going to be a totally different set of people we're collecting tax from. So that's important to recognize. It's like, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, the number of people who come through. If we're going to go for recreational sales to all of the people coming through the county, that's totally different business market than the medical sales we have now, taxing ourselves. So if we're going to have, say, a county sales tax, which makes sense on retail, then it would be on recreational. We're not taxing ourselves. If you're here and you're going to Robert's shop, you're a medical patient. You're not going to be subject to that tax. You're not paying sales tax anyway.
Okay, so then that brings up a question. Are we talking now about opening up the county to full adult use? Because if we're only going to be talking about medical, then tax is pretty negligible to even speak about.
Sure, and you have to have some element of the adult use industry in the county in order to receive to apply for grants and receive some of that money, from what I understand. Doesn't mean you have to have every aspect of the industry, but you can't block out recreational completely, I believe. I'm not positive on that.
Medical is paying sales tax right now. The only exception is if you have this state-issued ID card. And it's like, you know, for us, it's maybe 3 out of 800.
Get the
people
state-issued ID card if you got tax issues, and, you know,
And
what can I
it
say?
costs about $100.
Yeah.
Well, and that, you know, back to what I was saying, 5 or 10%, in the grand scheme of the entire taxation picture, that's not all that much. You know, if you're talking about a couple percent from the cultivator and a couple percent, say, a sales tax added to it, well, you're at 5%. So, of the whole picture. And so, you know, we're talking about maybe as a county.
I got a question,
maybe,
Kurt. From your bulb farm, from your family's bulb farm, what are your general taxes at the end of the day?
Very high, the
I
general.
mean, for real.
The
So,
general,
I mean,
the general,
let's compare. What I don't want to do is, again, you know, like we've publicly stated as a group many times, we don't want to create the cannabis industry as though it's something different than anything else. And so that is one thing we need to keep in mind. You know, when we speak of that, it parlays into every aspect of the industry. We can't pick and choose like, okay, taxes are where we're gonna string these people out and get as much from the county as we can. We just need to realize that, you know, every business has these break or make it or break it limits, and you know, cannabis isn't flush, and you know, the more regulated this market has become, the less we are, you know, the more the cannabis industry is acting like a business. And again, 1 to 2% makes a huge difference. That's when you can actually, you know, pull a profit from a business.
yeah, absolutely. However, the law that's been put in place to regulate this industry is speaking specifically to this issue, that there are these taxations that are different from all industries in place. And it is talking about, in the measure that was voted on, county taxation.
But it gives
So-
the opportunity to tax or not tax. And
That's
so
correct.
I suppose this is a county's, you know, decision.
This is correct. And that's why it boiled down to the first thing I said, where it seems to me that it's an overwhelming majority of the voters that would be in favor of a county tax. It's somewhat of an opinion, but that's why I perused it the way I did. That
I bet $1,000 it would pass.
When
on the ballot
40, yeah,
initiative.
when 40% of people vote
Okay.
no.
Well, let me frame
they
this in this respect.
Yes.
Sonoma County, for instance, you know, went through this process of trying to vote and put a voter initiative tax in front. Guess what? It failed. Because they realized the industry and the people who voted for Prop 64 looked at the numbers and they said, you know what? These businesses will not be successful. We have to frame it differently. So
Is it Sonoma or Monterey? That
it was Sonoma and Monterey.
Well, they passed a $15 square foot tax on their hose now
But that is on cultivation.
on cultivation, but it amounts
You know.
to a high percentage.
We're right now as a board, we're talking about taxing retail. And, you know.
We're talking about tax philosophy really right now. We're not talking about anything specific.
Right, but we can't just throw a broad-based, you know, number at the entire industry and say, this is what we're going to do, because, you know, each section of the market's different, and each one of those, you know, the underlying economics of that business, you know, is different, so.
Yeah, they should be taxed differently, I think, for sure. But the city of Eureka went with a no tax philosophy in order for their manufacturing and retail, and they jumped right in on, you know, big money, you know, heavy volatile manufacturing, which is from people who have plenty of money, I think, to pay a little taxes. They went in with a no tax thing to start with. I don't know if it'll change, but I think it was to invite in the business and to grab it.
Well, I mean, if you want to get down to it, look at hotel taxes. I mean, they came into the county where the county started out at 2% hotel tax, now it's 8%, and now the harbor's asking for the county, not the city, to throw another 2%. So, I mean, just to the hotel people that are coming into town to see Crescent City. So if they're coming into town to buy marijuana, tax the hell out of them. I mean, I don't care about the hell.
2 or 3%.
Tax them. And we should get taxes at the growing rate.
So what do you think about a couple percent, Eric, at the for recreational retail sales? We're talking about mostly tourists. If we add a couple percent at the county level 2% sales tax or something. I mean, nobody's even going to bat an eye at that. Nobody's going to drive to Oregon to avoid 2%.
Yeah, we just
sales
added,
No, and I realize that, it's just when Kurt had, I mean, I guess his arbitrary number just was like, 5 to 10%.
10%'s too high.
To me, I'm like,
Zero's too low.
My business survives on 2%. My other businesses might, it's like 2% is literally,
business
that's
person,
my money. It's what I make.
I'm just talking in the industry as a whole, if the county's able to garner something like 5% as a whole. So I'm not saying you as a business, but let's
Right,
say
that makes
the
sense.
grower is paying an additional 2%. And at retail sales, the county's getting an additional 2% sales tax. I mean, this accumulates as a whole. It doesn't hit one particular licensee with the whole 5 to 10%, let's say. I mean, as a county, we just passed, what was it, a 0.5% sales tax increase for the fairgrounds, and
They can't use that money, is from what I understand.
No, they can't.
Is that-
They have to go to a special committee to get it.
Oh,
But, ultimately, Jesse, I said 2%. Hey, that sounds like a fairly possible number
Are we
to put
talking
out
about
on a
medical
Bossier
or-
initiative. What's that?
Recreational retail sales.
Retail sales.
It's a starting point of 2%.
Yeah, as a county sales tax, a county imposed sales
I
tax
think-
on recreational retail sales at the retail outlet. That's-
The real economic winner is looking past this conversation and not taxing manufacturing. Right now, every community, besides, I think, one Jesse brought up that I know of, is taxing their manufacturing. The end game is a little bit build it and they will come. We want these big professional manufacturers to come that are doing everything just right and provide some jobs. They're not going to displace anybody here. If Chiba Chews is manufacturing in Oakland and they come up here to save the 2% tax, they provide jobs, people have a little bit more money, they spend their money in town, people pay taxes. We look at like the occupancy tax for the hotels, and I don't see that as a great thing. The government, I remember one year, I think what the general fund was 14 million, and a lot of that comes from the occupancy tax and property taxes. But then you see what they do to get that money gets kind of weird, to the tune, I think one owes the city still quite a bit of money, and it ended up being $250,000 for the school district because they end up giving grants and prioritizing this as our industry. I don't think that we need to look at it like we need to build our government off of this. We need to build an industry that provides for the people. I mean, that is the bottom line for why the government exists, And then I mean, to reach consensus, I guess we could be okay with the little tax. We're talking 40%, 40%. What kind of person has to
That's
pay
why
40%?
2% isn't much of 40%. That's where I'm getting at with well, yeah, if you're already cultivating and I have a 20% tax off the top, off on my gross, right? Now, it depends on the product. If I produce a high-value product, then it's only 10% of the gross. If I produce a real low-value product, then it's 40% of the gross. So that's sort of why the metric of the taxes doesn't work anyway. But look, so if I'm paying between 10 and 40% of my gross to the state, 2% to the county, on my end, if I'm going to do 2%, or have a $5,000, that's the cost for, so $1 a square foot for cultivation. That's what Humboldt County does. That's a small percentage compared to what I'm already factoring into my business plan. If I already have to factor in that kind of percentage, and I gotta retrieve that from my customer, I pass all my taxes on to my customer. I do in every business I've ever been in, every business I've ever seen. That's how it works. If you can't pass your taxes on to your customer, then you're out of business. You got to do a different business that you're better at, bottom line. And so if you're already paying those kind of taxes, a couple of percent to your locality isn't a big deal.
Let's match the fair then and do 0.25%.
I think 0.25% is too low.
How about 1%?
Because the sales tax, that is on everything. That's everything in the county, right? We're talking about a single product at a single outlet. You don't have to buy cannabis. When you have a county, a general-wide sales tax that affects everybody no matter what you're buying, diapers, medicine you have to have to live, not talking about cannabis, right? Taxes on cannabis are, what do you call it, discretionary, right? It's like, so it's not the same thing.
But then what's next?
Yeah, slippery slopes, right. Well, let's have the conversation next. If we say, let's say we start with 2% and somebody comes in and says, oh, we need to make it 20%. That's what's next. That's the discussion that's next. And I'm going to be up here talking about how crazy it is to have a 20% sales tax. So I think that the slippery slope idea is an excuse people use to not do anything. I hear that on both sides of politics. So I don't know. I don't think we need to use that as a way to not talk about it.
I mean, I suppose when you frame it in the reference point of, 2% to a county or 1% to the county and 40% to the government, it makes sense. I mean, to the state, it doesn't make it. Truthfully, I would pay 10% to the county. I would prefer most of our taxes stay locally, but that's just not how business, unfortunately, in this state is run. But again, as a business person, you have to watch out for your bottom dollar. And I do agree with some of your points, but again, I want to continue to stress that every percentage point we take from our businesses is going to, in turn, either hurt us or hurt the consumer. And we're a poor jurisdiction in the first place. Our general gross domestic product here sucks. Our living wages are horrible. And to expect that we're going to pass this off onto the people who voted for this is a little bit of a conundrum to me too, because I don't know where we, justify that. It's fairly hypocritical to say that, well, we just pass it on to our consumer, but these are our consumers, these people out here. And, if we were to frame it to them in a vote, if we have an exorbitant tax here, I guarantee you we'd have some people push back because they're the people who are going to be buying the product. We are running the businesses, they are buying the product. And, again, I would say it would be a 50-50 toss-up on a voter initiative with a tax that was too high. Trust me. I've seen it in many localities. It's failed many times.
I agree. Too high would be a 50-50 toss-up.
So 1%,
Sure.
2%, let's cut it in the middle. Let's go 1.5%, because that's something that, if we think about gross sales in the county, if we achieve $4 million, 1% of that's a sizable amount back to the county. So that
$40,000. Not very much in a year.
So I'd like to weigh in just quickly.
And we do some public comment after in a minute on this taxes thing too.
Okay, so I think there's two ways to look at this, and this discussion's been good, and I probably lean in towards, a little higher tax rate than that end of the room, but I think the point that needs to be made is that if we were, the tax at the growing level is one thing. So let's just assume that $4 million gross sales. That might be only, $2 million or $2.5 million worth of taxable product. When we get to retail, everything gets multiplied, and so now that's where the $4 million is taxable, and so 2% over there is worth 4% on the beginning. And so we just want to keep that in mind. It really does matter.
Also, it's important to remember that a lot of the cultivation that would take place here, if it were permitted, wouldn't necessarily be consumed here because of the variety, as you know, about variety of product. So you can't meet all the variety here. Exports, varieties come in. And so there'll be farms who won't sell any product in the county. And so that's why the taxes at the separate point needs to take place.
And along that, it was mentioned earlier that we got to think ahead and where we're really going with this as we get retail, and a lot of the people paying this tax ultimately are going to be consumers that are just passing through. That as we get to the recreational side of it.
Yeah, if we do get to adult use. I do know from, the discussions that I've heard from the Board of Supervisors is that wasn't, it was left up to us to kind of decide a recommendation, but I had a feeling that the 5 of them were leaning towards
I think the tax
just
needs to
medical.
go with that. I think that if there's going to be a tax, it needs to be adult use. If there's going to be adult use, there needs to be a tax. I think they need to go together.
Yeah.
In some way. I've heard other people suggest that the ordinance doesn't become effective until the tax is approved by the voters. I've seen that worked into the ordinances. You guys want to do some public comment on the taxes? We got one person I know who wants to talk.
Thank you. So taxes, let's just talk about gasoline for a minute, because the state just jacked the price on gasoline, right? And there's a whole bunch of people that swore an oath that they would no longer buy gas in California, they would go to Oregon because that tax isn't there. Me personally, if I happen to be in Oregon and I happen to need gas, I'm going to go ahead and fill the tank. But I'm not going to drive to Oregon because I need gas. But that's me. Now, if they add another $1 or $2 to the price of gas in California, now it's profitable for me to go because I got to spend time, money, gas to get there and come back. So when considering taxes on cannabis, you have to factor in what they're selling it for on the other side of the state line, because there's a store right the other side of the state line. They don't have to go very far out of California to get it, so it's a short trip to Smith River. So if the tax is here, get the price up to the point where it's like, screw it, I'm going to Oregon. You shoot yourself in the foot. And then there's no tax income because there's no sales. If there's no taxes, then there's no benefit to that 40% and probably half of the 60 that said, hey, great, we could get some money and yada yada, fix some potholes, whatever. No pun intended. So anyways, kind of figure that in. Now, tobacco, the taxes keep going up and up on tobacco because tobacco is bad for you. And they're trying to dissuade people from using tobacco to keep the health costs down. People are still buying the tobacco. So to say, oh, well, if we get the price too high, people won't buy it. It's like, if they want it, they're going to buy it. They might go to Oregon to get it, but they're going to buy it. So you kind of got to frame it that way. And then it's like, well, what's reasonable? Because, you know, as their multi-level market, you got the grower, the distributor, the retail outlet. At what point are you going to siphon off a little bit of money to pay for the sheriff deputies and planning department and everybody else that is involved in the thing? So common sense approach. Yes, you can make the tax part of the separate ballot measure. If it's not too high, it'll probably pass. Or you can start off low and say if it increases, it has to go to a ballot, to a vote. And then you don't have to worry about three knuckleheads getting on the board and saying, we're going to do 100% tax because we don't want it anymore. It's like, no, send it to the voters, and if the voters want it, they'll vote for it. If they don't want it, they won't vote for it. I mean, just don't overthink it. You know? That's just my recommendation as a citizen.
Thank you. Hey, Joel, can the voters pass an adjustable tax that then the board can play with the number?
Yeah, probably, as long as they approve a maximum.
If it was 1 to 3%, and then it could be adjustable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of complicated.
Overthinking it.
Yeah, I'd rather not do that. Keep in mind, absolutely any tax of any amount is going to the voters.
Right.
And if it's gonna go, if it's gonna be designated for any special uses, if it's gonna be, this tax is going for sheriff deputies, it's gotta be a 2/3 approval. So just
Right.
keep those things in mind.
Is that something we want to try to shoot for, a special tax, or we want to direct the money to a specific spot, which requires a 2/3 vote of the public, which is more risky? Or do you go for a general fund tax where you just try to get it with 50%? So a way to, if you tied the passing of an ordinance or affecting of an ordinance with the tax, say, you don't get your recreational cannabis outlets until you approve the tax, you know, and you might get 2/3 to approve that tax. But do we want to steer the money, or do we want it to just go in the general fund?
I would suggest general fund. It makes things much easier for the county and everything else. One quick question. The county puts a measure on the ballot to vote for a tax. Forget about the number for a minute. Does that tax then apply to the city, right?
Strictly speaking, the easy answer is no. No, it's only unincorporated areas. The more complicated answer is yes, but we don't.
But maybe it
Sounds like a lawyer.
I guess maybe technically it's possible to craft the taxation rule to say specifically to the unincorporated areas. That
Yeah.
way, city of Crescent City and Del Norte County can operate independently, but not, within the city limits, all of a sudden it would be doubled, let's say.
So, in general, the county gets to tax most things. But then there's a specific grant of authority to tax cannabis specifically, and the Revenue Taxation Code says that that ordinance needs to specify whether it applies only in the unincorporated areas or in the whole county. Now, that generally conflicts with general principles of law that says we can't tax the city. So I don't know exactly what that ordinance is all about, but there are lots of situations where a county might tax under a kind of a shared agreement with the city. And so it might be kind of like a sales tax where we pass a tax that applies everywhere, and then we have to remit a bunch of it to the city. So the complicated answer is we might be able to tax the city, but then we have to give them the money probably.
Just thinking in terms of, like you said, all of a sudden the city's taxing and the county's taxing, and then retail business doesn't even want to be in the city, and it all runs to the county.
I think they'll
Right.
balance it out. I think the city wants to balance it out and be the same as whatever the county is. So whatever the county comes up with, the city will just do the same thing. Or, not that they're copying us, but the city and the county, I think, want to come up with something they can both be in alignment with, and but then have the tax measures separate so that the paperwork's easier.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk at the city level, not taxing at the beginning, to allow for the industry to.
I think they were referring more to
So,
their manufacturing businesses. I
Yeah.
didn't hear that so much with retail.
Yeah.
So Joel, what you were saying, that there's a possibility for a taxation from a county and a county to a city-wide deal. Is the county already considering imposing that without what we're going through here? I mean, is the county gonna say, Del Norte County all of a sudden imposes 2%? And we, as a committee, sit here and go through all this rigmarole to say that we want 1.5% or 3% or whatever we're fighting over tonight or today or this year, and you guys go ahead and just,
I think the ordinance in general and the tax are kind of, should be considered together. The county is not considering a tax independent of, I think, what the working group recommends. They certainly might, but there are no discussions about it now. I mean, anything this working group presents, the board might look at and say, no, we want twice as much and whatever. But, I think the board will probably give some deference to what the working group comes up with.
the board will do a tax sometime,
I think that, if the working group recommends not doing a tax of any kind and has a good reason for it, like, the county will benefit more from the jobs created by an industry than the tax revenue created, right? It'll capitalize into property values and we'll get it that way. If the board has or the working group has a good reason, I don't know what the board of supervisors wants to do.
I expect a back and forth with this. I expect us to just like everyone's saying, not overthink it too much. Just get a starting point, accepting that that's not what we're going to have, and just kick it back and forth and see what it turns into, and not worry so much about predicting what it'll turn into.
Well, we somewhat are here so that we can maybe have a time frame for getting a retail outlet, or, all that, the taxation goes along with it. If we're throwing it back and forth, you're just adding months and months onto the 3 months that's already, we know, a minimum.
It could be like a tennis match where it happens quite instantaneously. So I'm not laying out a time frame, just only that we expect a response and then we can respond back only. That's
Yeah,
all I mean.
but-
We can certainly tighten it up. I mean, I would love to have the board sitting right there,
Yeah.
and then having them part of this discussion directly. It would save a lot of time.
Yeah, because, they meet, twice a month? We meet maybe once a month. So, you're back and forth, or at least in a month interval.
Yeah, we need to meet twice a month, and I think we're going to try to keep shooting for that. But yeah, I think we want to tighten this up.
For Joel, we're talking about taxation, and I guess specifically at the moment, we're kind of focusing on the possibility for taxation at the retail level, because we're talking about instituting first a retail ordinance that allows retail businesses before we get into all the other stuff. This needs to be voted on by the voters, right? And so there is some time of, what's the timeline that the county needs to be thinking of for adopting a measure to be put on a ballot?
So I talked to Elisa, the elections official, this morning, and she says it's already too late to get it on the June ballot. And to get it on the November ballot, she thinks about May. And so it can't just be a retail tax and then we'll deal with a cultivation tax when we get there. There needs to be a tax approved by ordinance of the Board of Supervisors sometime around May to get it on the ballot by November. So that's kind of why it needs to be maybe, a discussion for right now.
Well, there's some small talk, and maybe it hasn't happened here exactly yet, about going forward with the retail ordinance contingent upon tax approval. And we're talking specific, and so this potential taxation could be framed specifically under retail sales tax for that, or because you just said something like it has to be all encompassing.
We can do the tax all together, I think. That wouldn't be too bad, I think, to like have proposals for tax numbers on all the parts of the industry. My question would be is, can we have an ordinance that allows only one part of the industry and then have a ballot that has taxation on parts of the industry where we don't yet have an ordinance?
Yeah, I mean, if we put on the ballot, there'll be a 1% per square foot tax on cultivation, but we don't have a cultivation ordinance yet. There'll be nothing to tax, but the tax will be valid.
We can still go forward with creating the ordinances and it won't mess with things. Okay, perfect. I'd like to see we do something like that. So I think we can come up with something like a small level of tax that we can all agree on for a starting point. It's not too high to ruin anybody's businesses, but isn't so low that it's not there, and doesn't give some incentive to make this happen. And then we can revisit it in another election cycle or a special election, even if it's important enough.
I think what probably needs to happen is that we have a designated meeting to talk about the zoning map, and then a meeting to talk about tax. And there's a lot of stuff to get into on both of those. And so both of them are going to take a lot of staff time. So I don't know exactly how fast either can happen, but I think they're two separate discussions that need time, a lot of time.
I think to have a real good educated discussion on tax, we need to see in front of us precisely what the breakdown is that the state is taxing and where they're taxing it, so we can come to a more cumulative idea as to how the county should go about getting the tax at similar pinch points.
I can put that in an outline as it relates specifically to the cannabis industry and the actual prices.
I'd like to see our neighbors added to that also, both Humboldt and North, just to get a feel for what's going on.
I put this all together, most of it, back when I addressed the board. I don't know how up to date it is, but I'll try to brush it up, or I'll just give it to Jesse, and Jesse can look and check. I think Oregon is a 17% tax, if I remember, and then I don't know if Curry County has instituted its own. Humboldt has $1, $2 square, $3, depending on the indoor mixed use out. And then I don't think Siskiyou even allows it, I can't remember. And then there's a lot of data on Colorado and Washington. They changed their taxes, and Oregon changed as the market changed. And that's all interesting to consider, kind of where the price point they found was. And then the state of the market now, is it even working for them? Are they kind of driving different sectors out?
They all have a retail tax.
Yeah.
A quick little caveat fact about the Washington market currently. For the last year of 2017, they saw consumption and overall gross revenue sales in the state increase, but their tax revenue went down.
They started out with taxes that were too high, I think, and it crippled the market.
Yeah, Washington was, I think, 25% retail, 25 distribution, 25 whatever, and it added up to 37%. And the industry said that was too high, and they brought it down. One of the real kind of policy considerations is when you put in a rate, a percentage, it's going to fluctuate with the price. But when you do $9.25, it's not going to fluctuate, and it's actually going to be a higher percentage of the overall price, when prices decline. And California, I'll send everybody to, before they instituted the 3 medical bills, they did the Blue Ribbon Commission that studied all these issues and has some pretty interesting policy considerations in there. But California basically did both a percentage and a fixed amount to create both a floor so the price doesn't go too low, and to capture additional revenue as if prices go up. So those same considerations would be considerations for us. If we do $1 a square foot, that's going to be constant no matter what prices do, and then a 2% at the register, will fluctuate with the price. And those are all interesting and complicated things to discuss.
Yeah, definitely having the dollar price on a unit keeps the price artificially high at the retail level. I don't know if it's artificial, but the taxes keep it high at the retail level. So that's just shows clearly how the taxes just get passed on to the consumer. Then in the cultivation tax, the per square foot definitely fluctuates with how successful you are completely. But right now, the way Humboldt's doing it, their 1, 2, 3 tax, $1, $2, $3, depending on the type of cultivation, it really is low enough that it works out. It may not work out forever, but currently it's way below the other costs and fees that you incur doing business. But yeah, it may not work like that forever. So I don't know how, with cultivation, a gross receipts thing, I mean, it's all the production is tracked really carefully. So you already have access to all the numbers and the financials. So it doesn't seem like it'd be too difficult. All that has to be remitted to the state and the track and trace systems, and then the counties can develop their own track and trace systems, or utilize software that other counties are already using separate from the state one, and use that to get an idea of gross receipts, and then do percentage taxes on cultivation that way.
That's what the city's considering doing. They've been exploring, they're using their own track and trace program so that they can track sales and know all of that. So it might be something county wants to consider. I don't know how much staff time that would take and whatnot and add on, but it would definitely be
I think that's probably a non-starter. I mean,
I was surprised to hear the city, like, they were completely decided that they have to have their own track and trace system. And I was a little surprised, but with the size and the scale of everything, it seems a bit redundant. But it's because they're not allowed to access the state system. And so if the city wants their own metrics on it, then they can't get any.
Yeah, it makes sense from a city standpoint, though, I think, because, most of the production, if there is production within the city for cultivation, it's going to stay pretty close to the city spaces. I think it's a smart thing for the city to do. From the county's perspective, probably not.
Public comment? Any public comment? Okay, very good. Shall we wrap this up? We kind of covered the tax ideas, and it sounds like we want to get tax details going for all the sectors of the industry we want to consider.
Yeah, I think that from our comments, like Joel said, we
Sure. Separate them then?
separate them.
All right, let's just get into location, zoning, density, setbacks, kind of, right, for retail?
Yeah, on-site consumption.
How about just medical versus adult use?
That should be on there too, yeah.
We discussed, come to a consensus as a recommendation that what we're tailoring this for.
So that's more medical to recreational?
Yeah, well, it's medical, specifically medical, or are we going to
Yeah.
do adult use?
I'd like to take a couple minutes just to touch on that and see where, that is something we actually haven't talked about. We've kind of skipped around it. It is a big elephant in the room, really. So whether or not we're talking about having recreational retail sales, meaning no doctor recommendation, or medical-only retail sales. And so a lot of in the future, the grant money and stuff, I think it requires some engagement in the recreational market. I don't know if it's retail, but that's where all the tax revenue, if we're talking about a retail tax for the pass-through, it's going to come from that. So if we were to have consensus that we want to be able to capture that pass-through tax revenue, then we need retail outlet. It doesn't mean that every outlet has to be retail, but that also seems like a complicated thing, like which ones are going to be recreational, which ones aren't. I don't know if that's worth talking
Well,
about.
I think it's just up to the business person who's pulling the permit.
Right. I mean,
to
if the
choose.
county wanted to say that, if anybody here wanted to limit that, but I would like to I'd like to see the retail outlets that we have be able to be recreational or medical or both, and then be able to benefit the county with the pass-through traffic. I mean, we're not going to make anything taxing ourselves, as we've all talked about. There's just not enough people here purchasing cannabis products. It's not a number really to get excited about. It's going to be people driving through, the thousands of cars that drive through every day.
So Jesse, did I just hear you say it really doesn't matter? We're passing an ordinance that's going to apply to both.
Well, I think this county can decide, you can say, no, we don't want recreational access. That's possible. I think that's not a good idea for for tax revenue.
So you don't want medical taxes.
Well, it wouldn't, I mean, you could, but I think what we're talking about is a sales tax that would be just on recreational sales and not on medical sales. Especially now that there's more specific qualifications for medical cards. There's more rules. It's not as willy-nilly, I think, as it used to be. So, so if we're kind of as a consensus talking about including recreational retail sales, then we can just move on with that and not go over it anymore. Let the board decide that as a philosophical issue, as long as they decide or as long as they understand, how it's relevant to who the customers are, where the tax revenue is going to come from.
I would suppose it would be a little important for us to have some sort of consensus recommendation as to what we would think for the board.
Yeah.
If we are truly considering, the benefit of taxes, we need to come to a consensus that we're talking about adult use recreational, because we won't garner that from medical, and it'd be kind of a moot point to talk about. So I think that would probably be our first step. Are we as a group going to, come to a consensus on this is a ordinance drafted for adult use, or is it an ordinance drafted for medical?
So if we're all okay with adult use, then I think maybe we can right now say that we don't want to talk about on-site consumption in the beginning, if that's okay. Just so as not to complicate things and get this going a little sooner, add that as a separate issue. And then we don't even have to have those on our discussion. We can just talk about location, zoning, density, setbacks, and not the more philosophical side of rec versus medical.
I hate to skip out a little early, but it's early out for my kids, so I gotta go.
Cheers. See ya. Thanks, Robert. All right, we're ready to wrap this up then, talk about scheduling for next meeting.
So we're just going to do it before you get done? Do you have any ideas on time frames and days that you can meet?
We're totally open, we're just sharing a car right now, Wednesdays we'll be out, but every day I can help.
I don't have a calendar here. It's February, before the end of February, 2 weeks.
Basically, we would be looking at, it would be a week of the 26th through the 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So, Wednesday was our full day. 28th is Wednesday. 28th is Wednesday, my first is on Thursday. They're both open.
If you
Yeah,
have
I've
it
got
on the
Wednesday.
28th, I have to be out of here by 12. I have another appointment.
That's probably fine. If we'd have started on time, we would have been done on time.
I was
So.
here.
I'm blaming everybody else for that, chit-chatty and all that. Wednesday the 28th? Or do we want to back up a little so we
I
don't?
believe the 27th is a board day.
Okay. 28th. Yeah, I'll send out the doodle poll and make it official.
Or we could do that, that might not be a bad idea, I think, too, ahead of time here.
Huh?
Get another date lined up for our next meeting after that one.
I liked every 2 weeks.
Well, if we're gonna be able to get an ordinance or a tax on the ballot by May, you're gonna have to have something done in March.
Yeah.
Get it to,
Sure.
get it to whoever to get it to May.
I mean, we can meet every week. We can have 4-hour meetings if y'all are for it, So whatever y'all are up for.
March 14th is 2 weeks after that. and,
Okay.
2 weeks from now. It's also a Wednesday, 14th.
Okay,
It just helps me to pencil it in.
sure. Me too. Yeah. Do every Wednesday following every board meeting if you want. Right, I know. Yeah, we may be doing a crash course right at the end, right? Okay, everyone happy? Meeting adjourned.